Hello and welcome back to Living with Lost podcast. Today I'm joined by Maya Vahidi. She's come on to obviously discuss a little bit about the passing of her father and just have a little chat in general. Thank you for joining me today. Hopefully the internet connection's a little
You.
better now. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh God, hopefully.
So yeah, who are we
Yeah.
talking about today and just sort of share a bit of their story?
Yeah. So I lost my dad to cancer. He had cancer. He was diagnosed with cancer at the end of August last year, and then he passed away a few months after. So in like early October time, and the whole thing was quite sudden. It was kind of something like out of a film where they say you've got terminal cancer, your chances aren't looking great. So it was definitely a shock to my whole family, to me. I've never really experienced anything like that. Um, but I've definitely like learned a lot from it, and my grief is kind of something that has been changing a lot. But I'm definitely learning how to deal with it and different ways to cope, I think. But yeah, that's mainly my story.
I mean, one of the things I want to start off by asking you is,
Mm,
from what it sounds like, it was such a rapid sort of progression. You know, you said your dad got diagnosed in August, and then a couple
mm.
months later, he passed. That is a very. It's almost like you didn't have a proper amount of time to really comprehend what was sort of going on. Like, how did you find that?
Yeah. I mean, oh God, yeah, it kind of almost like looking back on it feels a bit like a dream. It was just so surreal. Doesn't really feel like it was part of my life, but um it was hard. I'm not gonna lie. Like the day we got the news was probably the worst day of my life. Um, but I just have a very like logical. My brain works quite logically. I'm quite methodical. Um, and when we got the news, my first reaction was kind of like, okay, so I've been told that I might not have very long left with my dad. What can I do personally to make every minute count and to make sure I'm there when he needs me and all that kind of thing? So I very much tried to just put aside the fact that this is awful and I don't know what's going to happen and all the uncertainty. I tried to put that aside and just think, okay, be there for your dad, be there for your mom, be there for your brother. Just do everything you can to make this whole thing just that little bit easier. Because then I knew I would look back on the time and be really proud of myself and be really happy that I held myself the way I did. Um, so yeah, I was kind of the rock in my family. I was kind of the one that kept them
Yeah,
together. Um, it just was what it was. I mean, it's not something you can control. That's what cancer is. But
no.
yeah,
I mean, I highly admire you for, well, as you put it, being the rock of your family. I think in whatever circumstances, a 21-year-old young woman, it's,
yeah,
to realize this was, well, to give yourself this kind of role during what possibly will be the hardest, period of time in your life is highly admirable.
mm,
I mean,
yeah.
did
Thank
you
you.
did you not feel like how did you feel kind of supported at that time? Because I feel
Yeah,
like it's conflicting being the rock and sort of needing help
yeah,
yourself.
definitely. Yeah, I mean, I've always kind of been someone that like worries about other people a bit too much,
Yeah,
um, and maybe not so much myself. But whilst I was being, the strong one in the family or whatever, I that gave me comfort. Like it gave me comfort sleeping next to my dad, most nights when my mum couldn't, or it gave me comfort helping my dad in every possible way, and like, you know, especially near the end as well. Like it all, even though it was hard, I wouldn't have had it any other way. I don't think I would have wanted to be there in any, as much as I could. So I kind of saw it like that. I kind of didn't. It wasn't like a chore to me. It wasn't, I wanted to be there. I didn't. I can't really imagine myself doing it any differently or handling it
yeah,
any differently to the way I did, because I think it's just the way I am, and that I just kind of did what I wanted to do and what I thought. was right. So I didn't
Yeah.
mind having that role with
Yeah.
my family because it just kind of came naturally to me. So yeah.
I mean, ultimately, there's no right or wrong way to handle situations. You know,
Mm.
I definitely kind of, I mean, my journey was a lot longer. It was over the spell of like 11
Yeah.
years. So I kind of,
Yeah.
you know, I'd seen her go through, mum go through such a transition in her life that
Mhm.
it wasn't that I was, but the thing was, I was never expecting her to pass. It was never, no one
Yeah.
explicitly told
You
her,
never do you?
no,
Yeah.
you never, you know, even I'm sure when dad sat me down and, you know, said, you know, she's got a couple weeks to live. When you hear something like that, you're like, it was baffling. Like, you know, you're going to the other room and she's watching TV. Like, it doesn't
Mhm.
fully make sense because when there's a living person on this planet, you know, to hear that in this certain, like, obviously the concept of death, eventually we will pass, but to hear there's such a, you know, a set in stone date for when a
Mm.
certain person was gonna, well, in a terminal situation, it is very, well, I found it quite emotional. Like, it was, and also
Yeah.
kind of a sense of disbelief. Do you know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I when we found out that he had terminal cancer and he didn't have long left or whatever, part of you does hold on to the idea that, you know, there's hope that he might get better. There's hope that
Yeah,
it might not be what they say it is. You know, he might somehow outlive his like lifespan that he's been predicted or whatever. But
yeah,
yeah, I mean, yeah, it was hard, and I think looking back on it, it was what it was, and I think you will always have that fear that that day will come where they might pass, but you will always hold on to the hope as well at the same time. And I think that's why it's just heartbreaking because you'll carry on until, you know, their last day and you'll still have hope. And then, you know, one day
yeah.
it does just happen, but no one can prepare you for that. So
No,
yeah,
no
yeah.
one, no one can teach you the meaning behind loss, and no one can teach you what it means to grieve
Mm.
because it's not a concept you sort of, you only learn the idea behind it once you're living, well, living
Mm.
with loss ultimately.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah.
did you ever discuss, like, with, like, did you, well, because it's quite a hard conversation to have, but did you ever talk to your dad about
Mhm.
the idea of him eventually passing and what that might mean for you?
Yeah. Not so much that it wasn't a conversation that we like had often
No.
or, you know, it wasn't something anyone wanted to talk about. But nearing his final days when he was in a lot of pain, um, you know, I do remember having conversations with him, with my family, where we kind of just reassured him that we'd be okay. You know, we kind of said to
Yeah.
him, like, look, don't worry, we don't want you to suffer. Like, don't worry about us, everything's gonna be fine. You know, we've had conversations like that. I mean, even on the first day that this all started, so on the day that he was diagnosed with terminal cancer, um, we did kind of, you know, he spoke about the idea that he's raised us as much as he could and he's just really proud of us and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So we definitely all knew what could happen, but we didn't want to believe it just yet until near the end, until it, you know,
Yeah.
it did happen. But I'm glad that we had those kind of conversations because it kind of gives you that reassurance. And I'm reassured knowing that he knew that we were going to be okay, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Um, so I am definitely glad we had those types of conversations, even
Yeah.
though they are very hard to have. Yeah.
They are incredibly hard, and, like, I know from these conversations that not everyone can have them, and I think it took to a
Mhm.
certain point for mum to really, and it's not accepting death, it was the idea that she was, you know, she had a want to live, and she would never
Mm.
converse about the idea of what if, because if she started thinking in that manner, then her body would start
Mm.
responding to what her mind sort of was reciprocating. So it was
Mhm.
definitely for her anyway, it was a very hard idea to sort of accept that this illness was terminal. And I mean, hearing something,
Mm,
anything is terminal, I mean, it must have been an incredible shock to you as well as your whole family, and your dad more
mm.
so. I mean, in the period, was it 2, 3 months? Because that is rapid.
Yeah, it was yeah, I mean, it wasn't it all kind of happened really quickly. His condition kind of just deteriorated, and it wasn't anything that we were expecting, to be honest. We
No.
thought that his chemotherapy would help him a little bit, but he didn't have that many rounds of chemotherapy in the end because his condition just got worse and worse.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it was definitely, I mean, it's definitely a trauma that will sit with me for the rest of my life. Um, but I am learning, and I'm learning how to cope, and I'm learning how to deal with it. And I don't have any regrets in terms of like
No.
those few months. I'm really happy of how I handled it, and I'm glad I spent as much time as I could with my dad, and I'm glad I did all these things. So
Yeah,
yeah.
most definitely. I mean, what was your dad like? Do you mind sharing a bit about
um
who he was?
yeah, no, of course, I'd love to. Yeah, so he was probably the most selfless person I know. He was very friendly, very warm. He was the type of person that, he'd go out of his way to like help a stranger. He was just so kind and so just, he'd always put other people before himself. Um, and and I think because he was such a loved person, and he touched so many people, that kind of stays with me, I think. And
Yeah,
I'm so proud of his daughter and everything. So it is, I remind myself of that when I'm feeling a bit low, when I'm feeling a bit down. I just, I reminisce, and I just remind myself of how kind he was in spite of everything. He was always a really lovely person to be around.
I can definitely tell. Like, obviously, kindness is a massive aspect of your life. I mean, from what you said at the beginning about how you kind of want, well, that selfless, that care, how you wanted to, during the hardest bits of your life, you were sort of helping others. I mean, your dad must have been extremely proud that, you know in such a moment of need you were helping others. I think that, I mean, that's something I'm kind of gauging from what
Yeah,
the brief description of your father.
yeah, yeah. He was just, I think maybe that's where I get it from in a way. Like, I wanted to be that person for him and kind of pay him back for all the wonderful years he's like raised me and everything.
So how, well, when the loss first happened, how did you sort
Mm,
of initially react to that? Like, how was your initial response to, well, the loss itself?
yeah. Um, Initially, I mean, obviously you're really upset and you're heartbroken and everything, but in some ways, I wasn't crying the first day, and I think that's
Yeah,
because my dad was in so much pain, and he was suffering, and he did want to go. That I was just so relieved that he was in a better place and that he wasn't suffering anymore, because we hated to see him like that. Um, so initially, I was just in a lot of shock, but there was an underlying sense of relief because I knew he wasn't in pain anymore, and that was really important to me because just seeing him suffer was just horrible.
yeah,
And then as the days passed, because as it becomes longer and longer since you last have seen them, it did get harder, and it definitely started to sink in. But it was just a period that I just kind of I took each day as it came, and I didn't, do very much. I just kind of let myself feel the emotions that I was feeling at the time, and I think that definitely did help. Um, yeah, and just being with my family and just, remembering him and looking at old photographs, just reminiscing, all that kind of stuff really helped me focus on the good at a time when,
yeah.
I'd just seen my dad pass away. Yeah, so that definitely helped.
Yeah, I mean, was the is like, initially, was that something you felt you could talk about? Because I know how, I mean, I guess it's
Mm.
the concept of loss is very hard for people to sort of engage with. It's a conversation that not everyone can have. So how did you kind of, was that something you felt open to early on, or not so much?
Um, I would say early on, I wasn't so open to talking about it just because it was still so fresh and I was still in a lot of shock. Um, and then as time went on, I didn't want to bottle up my feelings. I didn't want to keep it
Yeah,
all inside. So I would start to open up about it to like my close friends, to other family members. Like I did start to open up and I think that definitely does help. But with grief, you've kind of just got to go with the flow. You know, one day you might be feeling really able to talk about it with people. And then one day you might wake up and you just want to stay in your room all day and not talk to anyone. So I think
yeah.
just listening to yourself, what your mind is telling you and how you feel that day is really important and just yeah, following that kind of idea definitely just helped me, I think.
Um, I mean, obviously, I think I have to address the fact that this was during COVID, and um,
Yeah.
did that make things any harder? Because mum had her
Mm,
stone setting during lockdown, which a stone setting
mm,
is like this thing in Jewish tradition where a year after the we bury her, we put the stone
mm,
up. Um, and
mhm.
usually there would be quite a lot of her friends, her family would come, but because of the circumstances, there was just us
Yeah.
six. And in a way, it was nice because it was more, intimate, and just it was less of a fuss was made, which is something I benefit from. But how did you, like, what did
Yeah. So COVID definitely made the whole thing a lot harder. Um when we were visiting my dad when he was in the ICU, we were very limited to how long we could
yeah,
be there. And we had to, it could only be two people at a time or whatever. So that made the whole thing a lot harder because there were definitely, there were rules that were put in place for good reason.
yeah,
But it just made things that bit harder. So that was definitely hard. And then um yeah, I mean my dad had actually contracted COVID
oh
a
really,
little bit before he yeah, a little bit before he had cancer. Um, he recovered from it, but then he never seemed to fully bounce back, like he wasn't
yeah,
100%. It could have happened at any point in my life and it would have been just as hard, I think. So I try not to worry about, you know, all the what ifs and this kind of stuff with COVID and like if he hadn't had COVID, would he have
yeah,
been able to fight the cancer better and all this kind of stuff because there's I don't see any point in trying to look back on that and um I just think you've got to try and look forward. So but yeah,
yeah.
COVID definitely did affect us during the whole thing. Um but as it affected many people. So yeah. Yeah.
Well, no, it's just the fact that I remember seeing mum, when she was at her worst in the hospice. It was
Mm,
the fact, I think, that left me with some comfort, was the fact that she was with us, at her hardest point in
mhm.
time. So, a concern for me was thinking, well, if this did happen during COVID, how isolated she may have felt.
Yeah,
But is that something you feel like your dad may have felt, or
definitely. I mean, when he was in the ICU, um, it's a ward where it's a ward for very sick patients,
yeah,
basically. It was very clinical. It wasn't the nicest place to be, and I think after a few weeks in there, it definitely took a toll on him. Um, but very luckily enough, he was able to come home when he
okay,
was critically ill. So for the last week of his life, he was at home, which I think definitely helped. It helped us, it helped him. He was a lot happier, he felt safer. I felt more happy knowing, I was waking up to him being there. It wasn't that I had to jump in an Uber and go to hospital and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. So
Which is never nice, is it?
no, it's I'm so put off hospitals now from
Yeah.
everything that's happened. Yeah, but no, I'm very, very grateful that he was able to spend his last, his last week or so at home, because a lot of people don't get that. Um, so yeah, I'm very lucky in some ways that I did
Yeah.
get to say goodbye, and in a nice, in probably the best way possible. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I guess like the fact that he was in some, well, as comfortable as you can be, when
Mm,
you are in that situation. I think it probably is very difficult to pass in a hospital. I mean, I fucking hate hospitals. I mean,
I know.
I wasn't a big fan of them before, but just seeing, it's well, just how ill everyone is, and it just kind of like
Mhm.
readied mum for like her death, which,
Yeah,
but
it's
like
not
it
nice.
just no. It's hard though. It will always be hard, but that's one thing that obviously I admire, that you have come here today to obviously talk to me at such an early point in
Mm,
your grief journey. Because of course, one thing that I've found, and I'm sure in your in your you've also found, is how much grief actually changes. Like there is no structure, but there isn't a
mm,
pattern. There isn't like in 2 months' time you're gonna be able to run the marathon, or like or I don't know what the relevance of that was, but
yeah.
my point is there isn't a set in stone process that happens, sort of thing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I kind of feel like grief is a bit like a river, like a meandering river that kind of, you might take a few steps forward, and then, you might suddenly find that actually you're feeling worse than you did before. And then I think it just changes all the time, and you can't predict how you're going to feel. You might feel good one day and not the next day, but that is just part of the process. And I think if you just like accept that's the way it is, it's a lot easier. Whereas
Yeah,
if you kind of resist all your feelings and you just kind of keep it all in, I mean, if I did that, I think one day I would just kind of combust. Like,
yeah.
it wouldn't work. So you just kind of got to go with the flow and just accept that one day you might not feel great, another day you might feel better. And that is just grief. That is just kind of, yeah, what grief is, I guess.
It is easier said than done, though, to just, I think,
Mm,
to just go with the flow. I mean, I definitely couldn't always I think now that I've kind of rationalized my grief a lot more, it's definitely something I can advice I can follow. But I think when you first do experience these emotions, it's a calamity. Like
mm,
they're things you haven't, the idea of walking past her room and um
mm,
smelling, her jumper that she wore, and just
yeah.
sort of little things that, have no significance prior to a
Mhm,
passing, and now just like just overwhelming completely. But
yeah,
have you had any
I
sort
get
of
that
like
too.
any feelings like where you know, well, yeah, have you sort of like seen like anything that particularly gets you kind of emotional, or not so much?
Um, I would say there's definitely like triggers that
Yeah,
kind of will appear at random points, especially when you're not expecting it. Just things that maybe my dad used to like, or things that remind me of him. Sometimes
yeah,
like make me upset in a sudden moment, but that is just kind of what happens. And I think, it's okay to feel sad for a bit. It's okay for something to make you upset, because it's only natural that you would feel that way. So I try to just let myself feel sad in the moment if something does make me upset. But then again, sometimes it can have the other effect where something remind me of him, but in a positive way, and
yeah.
it will make me smile. Um,
Like what?
so I think, like, I mean, it could be
Am I putting you on the
anything from
spot
my
here?
dad, but no, I mean, like, I don't know, like my dad used to love apple pies from
Oh,
McDonald's.
okay.
So
Yeah. From
like
McDonald's?
sometimes, yeah, it was just this weird thing he had where he didn't like
Little late night
anything else.
drive-through.
Yeah, he just didn't like anything else really from McDonald's besides the chips or apple pies, and that apple pies are now like so associated with my dad. So if there's any scenario where an apple pie crops up, like I think of my dad, but like in a good way.
Yeah, of
But there's
course.
there's so many different things like you know that I think that remind me of my dad. I mean, I have photos everywhere. I've got his jumper that he used to wear a lot, and I wear. Yeah, go on.
Does that leave you with comfort when you wear his jumper? Or yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, all my friends who know me know that I wear all his coats because my
Oh,
dad
okay.
had an extensive collection of different types of jackets and things.
Yeah.
And there's one in particular I wear a lot that is really big and oversized, and it almost feels like he's giving me a hug when I
Oh,
wear
that's
it.
lovely.
Quite nice. Yeah. So there are definitely little things that can make something bad, you know, seem slightly more positive. And I think everyone's grief is very individual. So for some people, wearing their loved ones, old clothes might not make them feel any better, but for me it does. And that's just
Yeah.
part of like working out what makes you, happier and what helps you cope. So I've been very
Yeah.
like active in that sense. Like I've really tried to figure out ways I can keep my dad's memory alive and still
Yeah.
remember him and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely wanna, discuss how it's not I wouldn't say positive, it's more how
Mhm.
uplifting, like, it is very easy to sort of, like, curl in on yourself and sort of just hate life and just sort of, like,
Mhm.
um, just be so angry towards the world. But,
Yeah,
to be so open and so, well, I guess, uplifting, it is inspiring, to sort of I guess everyone handles loss differently.
yeah, yeah,
And there is no way to say that, um, someone who can't talk about it for the next 5 years of his life, although to some people that would just not be the right method, and for me, that would be
mhm,
so against what I not only stand for, but my recovery, but for some people, that
yeah.
is what works for them. Um,
Mm.
but so how did you kind of find this is what are you quite self-aware? Like, did you just sort of
Yeah,
understand?
yeah, I think that's kind of what it is. I'm very, yeah, self-aware of how I feel. I'm quite in touch with my emotions. I think because of that side of me, I have just worked out what works best to help me cope.
Yeah.
Um, like, in the first 2 months after he passed away, I was reading a book that I found really helpful. And, it might not help everyone, but for me, it worked. So I think
What book
it
was it?
takes time to know what. It was called Finding Meaning by David Kessler.
Okay.
It was just a book that had lots of nice little like anecdotes and different ways to help you find meaning in the person you've lost, but obviously just I guess finding ways you can remember them and things like that. Um, and I really liked that aspect of grief and that idea that you can still remember them in your future life, even though they're not around.
Yeah.
So I read that book that really like highlighted different ways. And maybe that, to be fair, maybe that's where I got all my ideas from to just try and remember my dad and things. But it's not something that always comes naturally to people, I think. I
No.
think when you lose someone, you are just in such a dark place for such a long time that you're probably not thinking about how you can make yourself feel better. But
No.
at some point down the line, something will just click in your head and you will want to try and feel better. And I think that
Yeah.
definitely happened to me quite early on. And that's probably why I do have all my little coping mechanisms that
Yeah.
help me. Um, yeah,
I mean, we keep saying early on, but I think there's something it's important to recognize that because there is no set in stone
time
way to
scale.
grieve.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it might be early on to me, or well, to Katie, but just because it's early on to you, like I wouldn't say it's early on. That's just how I guess you navigated and handled your situation, which
Mm, mm.
and I think that's what is so unique about a loss. And do you have any siblings, by the way?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I've got one brother who's 3 years younger than me. Yeah,
Okay.
got a brother.
And so well, it's you guys.
Um,
Well, from my experience, everyone
mm.
responds to the loss. There isn't a set way that you respond. So, like, did you find that you guys do respond to it differently? Like, are you sort of more aware of what's going on, or not so much, sort of thing? Like, you'll kind of talk about it.
Um, yeah,
Or,
I think no, I think definitely. I mean, I've definitely handled it differently to my brother. Um, and I think that's just natural. It could be that we're different ages and he's,
yeah,
I mean,
the age thing, and being so young. Being are you 20, 21?
yeah, I'm 21, yeah.
And losing a parent, at a very early point in your life, and having these massive transitions, and you're going to graduate uni soon, and get a nice
Mm,
career. Have you Is that something you think about, and how it might be difficult?
yeah, it's definitely something that is in the back of my head. I think the future is something I worry about more than the present because
Yeah,
there's all these unknowns and and you don't want to hit all these milestones without you that person. Um, so it's definitely something I worry about, but I just feel like it's something I have to just take it as it comes. And um, I very much like to believe that when people pass, they are still kind of watching over you and
yeah,
that whole concept of like they're still around you and they still care about you, they still want you to succeed and they're always proud of you and everything. I do believe in that, so I know that whatever happens, like my dad will be watching. So it it is hard knowing that he won't be there, but at the same time I have that reassurance
yeah.
that he is there in like another form, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, no, it does make sense, because I'm of a similar belief. I do, I speak about it quite a lot, but they're these feathers I find, and in the well, this channel's logo is a white feather, because um
Mhm.
the feather is sort of, in my mind, that's mum's way of guiding me, and sort of just continuously being a mother, and continuously sort of like engaging in my life. Like, it's not like I find them every single day, because I don't, but I find them when I really need them. And
Yeah, oh, that's so nice. I love
it
that, yeah.
it's just like what you were discussing. It's sort of mum watching over me, and sort of just sort not I wouldn't say guiding, but it's just sort of like an acknowledgement that she's still here, and still
Mm.
watching. Um, I mean, it of
Yeah, it's like a
course.
little sign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have anything like that?
Um, Not particularly. I wouldn't say I've got anything
Yeah.
like that, but I still dream about my dad sometimes, which
Okay.
I treasure those dreams where he
Yeah.
he appears because
Yeah.
you get to see him again. So um I definitely have things like that. I mean, like I said before, it's just because he was so ingrained in like my life and he brought me up, everything is connected to my dad in some way. So
Yeah.
I can't really go through a day without thinking about him at some point, because there will be something that sparks a memory, which I think is a really nice thing because then I'm constantly thinking of him, I'm constantly remembering him.
Yeah.
But I think it's really nice that you've got the feathers thing because that's just a really nice symbol, and I think that would definitely like give you reassurance and things. I think that's really nice.
No, it
Yeah.
definitely does. It definitely does leave me with reassurance. I mean, I do wanna speak about your dreams, actually, because that's
Mm.
I know some people do, their dreams can either be extremely vivid, or just sort of, I guess, a source of comfort. I
Yeah.
haven't dreamt about mum.
Oh, have you
I
not?
don't
Okay.
No, I haven't. I don't know why. I guess it's just not where my brain goes to at night. I kind of have really strange dreams about jelly beans, which, like, that's just what my mind's saying. But, when he does come to you in these dreams, is it
Yeah.
comforting or kind of alarming?
Um, I mean, I don't think I've had a dream with him that's not been a happy dream, which I think is
Okay.
quite nice. I mean, the dreams I can remember, they've been really positive and quite nice memories. I mean, I've had a dream where we were on holiday and we were at like a water park, which was a happy dream, and and
Mhm.
I've had I've had quite nice ones. I've definitely had ones that have ended where something's not been quite right, and I guess maybe that's my brain processing the fact that he's not here anymore. Um, but no, I haven't had any kind of negative dreams or anything like that. They've been quite vivid and quite positive, which I'm really grateful for.
Yeah.
Because I always kind of wake up with like an image of him in my head, which I quite like. So yeah,
I think that is nice because it's I know it can be, when you do experience something like that, it can be such a transition to wake up and sort of, you know, him not be physically about. So it it
yeah,
I I feel like it's a really comforting way to sort of to look at life, and I know not everyone could handle a loss and could handle imagery and things like that in that manner. So I think do you know what is lovely? The fact that you've sort of noticed what is you've kind of triggered, or you've kind of not triggered, the word is like pinpointed. That's the word, pinpointed, like
yeah,
what kind of works for you and what leaves you with comfort. I mean, do you ever find yourself having like really off kind of shitty days where like you're just locked up, not
yeah.
locked? Yeah.
Yeah, no, no. I mean, I do get those days where like I mean, I'll get days where I just want to cry all day,
Hmm.
or I'll just everything will just all my other problems in my life kind of feel bigger because I'm feeling really low because I'm missing my dad.
Yeah.
So I've definitely had those types of days where just everything gets too much and you feel really overwhelmed and kind of feel like you can't escape. Um, but I think just acknowledging that those days are bound to happen, and you know it would be unusual if I didn't have those days. I think is important because you need to be able to like feel how you're feeling at that moment. So when I do have those bad days, yeah, they're bad, but then I know they're going to pass, and I know that it's all just part of the process and the healing process. So um, I've learned to just kind of accept that I can cry and I can have off days, and that's
Yeah.
normal.
Yeah. Because they definitely do pass. They don't. Um,
Mm,
they're it's one of those things that when you are in that place and the world seems the universe hates
mm,
you, it's sort of like
mm,
easy to like be so self-deprecating and sort of just lie in
yeah,
your own pain and pity. But it's hard to sort of really see life in a positive manner. But then
mm,
alternatively, when you are having, I guess, positive days and you are thinking of mom or your dad in a positive manner, it's like, oh, grief is manageable. It's not, it's not this big
mm,
scary thing that I don't, I'm afraid of. It's something that I can handle, sort of thing. And I think that's
yeah,
important,
definitely.
handling your grief.
Yeah, yeah, and you'll never really know the best way to handle your grief. It's just
No.
like a learning process, I think. It's just something that, you know, it will be probably harder at the start, but then with time you work out what works for you and what how you deal with it. And I think that's really important. And as long as you are in touch with yourself and you do think about you have like a want to heal, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
you want to get to a place where you're a lot happier and things, then it will come, but you have to just in my opinion, try not to wallow all the time and try
Yeah.
and be like proactive as you can. I think that's quite important, but I guess it is hard for some. So I understand that not everyone is like proactive as me.
No, but something you pointed up on, I think it's the idea of actually you have to want to, like, you have to want to get better, and it's easy
Yeah.
to sort of, feeling unhappy and feeling very, and I'm linking in sort of anxiety and depression, but when you are in a position where you are
Mhm.
feeling very horrible, it's very easy because it's safe, to escape those things are hard. It's difficult to sort of think
Mm.
happy thoughts. So it is important to want, really, really deeply want to improve. And for some people that isn't easy. It's easy to, you know, feel upset and down because if moving forward may mean that they're kind of living pushing, their parents or brother or whoever it is in the background. I mean, for me and for you,
Yeah.
that's not the case, but I understand
Mm.
why and how, because grief is just something you can't really explain, you can't pinpoint,
Mm.
you can't
No, not at all.
work out, whether it's mental, but at the same time, it's nice to have coping mechanisms. Do you find yourself, because you said you're quite in touch with your emotions, something
Mm.
I like to do, I like to write. Is that something you find comfort in, or do you not really write? It's just you kind of can tell.
Um, yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily like write as my main form of coping. I've got a little notebook that my dad used to like scribble in and just kind
Mm.
of write random things in. And I kept it near, I found it near the time he was passing away and I kept it, and it's still got his handwriting in it. So what I sometimes do if I'm having like a night where I can't sleep, or my mind is racing, I'll just open that book and like scribble down something about how I'm feeling, or like if I've got a
Yeah,
message to him, I'll write something in there, or just that. I do that kind of stuff. But I think maybe I don't so much write. I think I talk about it. I think that's
yeah,
probably how I cope better. I talk with my friends, or I go on a walk and I talk about him, or I think about him, and that's kind of, I think, my main like coping mechanism, I think.
yeah. Do you have those, um and how well, I've just thought of like 3 different questions, but,
That's right.
so when you do discuss with your mates,
Yeah.
how do you kind of feel their response to the idea of you talking about loss? Because I know it's a very
Mhm.
difficult topic for non-grievers to kind of, they're like, "Oh shit, he said his, dad, but he's dead." Like, I don't
Yeah.
like, do you know what I mean? Like, how do
Yeah.
you kind of how do
Navigate
you
around that,
yeah,
yeah. Um, well, I mean, I'm the type of person that, like, I don't mind if people ask me about my dad, or if
yeah,
they mention him, or, like, I have no issues with that at all. I would love to talk about my dad, if anything. Um, so when I bring him up in conversations, I mean, most of my friends, they're all really comfortable with it. They just
yeah,
we carry on talking, we don't, it doesn't kind of create like an eerie silence, and it doesn't make things awkward. But I've definitely noticed that with some people, they do go a bit quiet, but I think that's just because
yeah,
grief is something that isn't spoken about that much in society. There's still
yeah,
a bit of taboo around death. So I
yeah.
think that's maybe why some people might not feel that comfortable talking about it, but that's not their fault, and
No,
there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, some people are more able to and some aren't. So,
yeah,
if people ask me about my dad, or if they ask me about that situation or anything, if I'm able to talk and I feel comfortable talking, I definitely will. Um, but then equally, I'm never expecting people to bring that up, or there's no expectation from my friends. It's just, it is what it is. If I want to talk about it, then I will. So
yeah. I
yeah.
think that's kind of what makes it hard for other people because they don't, in their mind, they're not entirely sure what benefits you, and some days I
Mm.
will love to talk about mum, and I won't shut up about the time she, I don't know, yeah, I was gonna say something that I shouldn't, but yeah, just but then other times I just don't, I don't want to discuss it. So I think it's important, especially when you are young, because
Mm.
we're this is an age where, in a way, we've had to mature at a very quick age, and the fact that
Yeah.
I don't, you don't have a dad and I don't have a mum. There is that one less person you can kind of talk to. So I guess
Mm.
what it is important to have a friendship group around, but it's kind of also important to for non-grievers, I think, is what I'm getting onto, to kind of really, and because it is okay to talk about it. It's okay to
Yeah.
ask, "Do you want to talk about this? And is it okay if I ask you about your dad?" Because you're not going
Mm.
to get upset about something like that.
Mm. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think because a lot of people haven't been touched by grief, they haven't experienced loss. So in that sense, I mean, if this hadn't happened to me and because I hadn't really experienced any loss, any really big loss until
Yeah.
now. If I was, still that same person and someone else in my life had lost their dad or lost their mum, I think I would also be really, like, I would almost tiptoe around
Yeah, yeah, of
that
course.
because
It's
you're
natural though,
not
isn't it?
sure. Yeah, you don't know where, what the boundaries are, and you don't want to make anyone upset. So it's kind of easier just to take a step back, I guess. But that's why I think it's important to be really open with your friends and just asking about them or anything like that. As long as you have that communication with your friends, then you can kind of establish a relationship where everyone's, happy because you're happy and that kind of thing.
Most definitely. Um, but yeah, no, I completely agree with that, and in my opinion, conversation is therapy. Is I don't know how I've just done that, but is therapy something you
Mhm.
consider, or not entirely?
Um, it's something I've very recently started. Um,
Yeah,
Started it very, very recently. Last, so I can't really say if it's something that's definitely going to help me or, but I think knowing the type of person that I am and knowing that I like to talk about things when I'm upset, I think it will definitely help me. And I think it helps a lot of people. So I'm definitely going to give it a go and
yeah.
just see where it takes me, I think.
Well, I guess it's
Yeah.
important to try these things to sort of,
Yeah.
um, to hear kind of from a professional is always important. Um,
Yeah.
I do. So, have you kind of, because obviously you're at university, which we haven't really touched that much upon, but have you,
Mhm.
being so far away from London, is that,
Yeah.
well, or home, wherever,
Mm.
is that something you found particularly hard, or not so much?
Well, I've been kind of back and forth from uni and home because this year was quite a whirlwind. So it's not that I've kind of been in either place like
Yeah,
for a very long period of time. I've kind of been back and forth um, where I can. When when I'm at home, I wish I was at uni, and when I'm at uni, I wish I was at
yeah,
home. But
yeah,
I
yeah,
think by spending time by spending time in both, you know, in both environments, I've kind of got the best of both worlds, and I do miss
yeah,
my family at points, but they're only a phone call away, so it's nothing that um, worries me or anything because I know I've still got my family support and I can
yeah,
still ring if I need to or anything. But I think it's important when something like when you lose someone, you do part of you does want to just find your feet again and still feel like your life is carrying on. And I think that's why there was a moment where I thought, no, I do want to go back to uni and everything. So um, you've just got to kind of listen to yourself and still carry on as much as you can, even
yeah,
though you're living a new normal. There will. I mean, at least with me, there was definitely a part of me that wanted to come back to uni and and, you know, be around my friends and still live like a student life and
Yeah.
everything, despite everything that happened at home. But yeah.
Yeah, I completely understand that. Um, I probably am gonna wrap it up because I'm not entirely the internet actually has been quite decent, so I think,
Yeah.
fair play. The, mom's probably watching over the chat and supplying a good connection. But,
Yeah.
so before I kind of end it, I like to sort of wrap it up on one kind of note.
Okay, yeah, cool.
And if you were to say like, if you were to have a conversation with your dad again and, you know, if,
Yeah.
um what is it that you'd sort of say to him?
Oh, that is a tough question.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah. I think the main thing I'd wanna say is, like, thank you, I think, just because he was, I mean, everyone's biased, but he genuinely was the best dad. And he gave me the life that I live now, so above all, I'd wanna say thank you, I think, and that I think about him all the time, every day, you know, before I go to sleep, when I wake up, but yeah, I'd mainly wanna just thank him, I think. Yeah.
That's very, lovely. Thank
Mhm.
you, obviously, for joining me today. Hopefully
Yeah,
the,
thank you for having me.
no, but it's honestly really lovely chat, and I was a little bit nervous at the beginning because of the internet. I was like, "Oh,"
Yeah, me too.
but, yeah, that's kind of a bit shit with the, with Zoom, but, yeah, it was a very lovely chat, and I really enjoyed learning about your perspective and sort of hearing about like well, because it is really early onset grief what we're talking
Mm,
about. It's not, you know,
mm.
over like you said 10 years, it's months we're talking about, but
Yeah,
it's nice to hear be so open at such a, you know, well, for many such a difficult, well, point in their life. Not to say it's not
yeah.
difficult for you, but you know, it's obviously lovely to hear your perspective.
Mhm.
But yeah, well, thank you once again, and
Yeah, thank you.
have a lovely rest of your week.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
I just want you to find your truth and stick to it. I know you'll be okay. I know it. From the bottom of my heart, I know it. I love you, Baba.